That day, too, the rain just wouldn't stop. Cold streets soaked through, loneliness sinking deeper with every drop. But never in my life did I imagine that, in that rain, I'd meet the one who would end up saving my life. When I was younger, all I did was work for my family. Every morning I'd cram into the train. Every night I'd collapse into bed. Years passed in a blur of duty and responsibility, with no time to tend to my own heart, let alone connect with neighbors. And then the years took everything. My kids grew up and left. Even my wife, she wasn't by my side anymore. With no reason left to stay in the city, I went back to the town where I grew up. But everyone I knew had already passed on or moved far away. Only the old alleys in my house remained, no familiar face to welcome me back. And with my quiet, introverted nature, it was nearly impossible to make new connections. So all I had left around me was silence, cold, empty silence. In the end, is that what life does to us? Leaves us all alone. The narrow alley, already old and empty of people, looked even lonelier under the rain. As always, I walked with heavy steps until my eyes froze on one spot, as if by fate. Beside a shabby little shack at the corner, scraps of paper and food waste lay scattered around a trash bin. And under a soggy, crushed piece of cardboard, there was a small shadow, curled up and trembling. I stepped closer. It was a puppy, drenched from the rain, shivering from head to toe. Hunger, fear, and exhaustion were written all over its tiny body. Its fur was caked in mud, its little eyes frozen cold. My chest tightened. Somehow, it felt familiar. In those pitiful eyes, abandoned, left to fend for itself, I saw my own crushing loneliness staring back at me. That little creature in the alley felt like looking straight into a mirror of myself. I could have just walked past, pretended I didn't see it, like I'd done with so many things in life. Truth is, I'd never had a pet before. I wasn't sure I could handle it. I didn't know if I had what it took to take responsibility for this life. But my feet, they just wouldn't move. When I looked back, something inside me shouted loud and clear, "If you walk away now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." So I stopped overthinking, stopped calculating. I just let my heart lead me and turned back toward that little life. I'd never walked this kind of path before, but I took a slow step toward the trembling pup. I reached out my hand carefully, but the little one pulled away. It pushed back at me with its tiny paw, baring its teeth with cold, wary eyes, desperate to protect itself. And right then, I understood. How cold and cruel the world must have been to this little soul. How deep the wounds must run, that it couldn't even open its heart to a stranger. In those eyes, I saw all the moments it had fought just to survive. Even so, I couldn't give up, because behind that sharp, defensive gaze, I could see something else, a deep loneliness that looked so much like my own hidden scars. Its struggle almost sounded like words, "Don't come closer, don't leave me behind again." In that moment, our loneliness resonated with each other. And I knew I couldn't turn away. In the end, I picked him up. I could feel his tiny body trembling, his heart racing in fear against my chest, but I couldn't let go. Holding him tight, I whispered softly, "It's okay now, you'll never be alone again." And deep down, I knew it was true. If I left him behind, I'd never find light in my life again. He wasn't a stranger anymore. He was my last hope, my destiny. So that day, under the cold rain, I carried him home. And with that little life safe under my umbrella, for the first time in years, my heart began to beat again. The very first thing I did when I brought him home was wash him clean. His whole body was matted with mud and dust, his fur stiff like an old broom. At first, when the warm water touched him, he thrashed in fear. But little by little, he loosened up, letting me handle him. My touch was still unfamiliar, but I could feel that tiny heart beating softly against me, and it filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in years. As his eyes slowly softened, I felt hope for the first time in so long. And when his dirty fur turned clean again, it felt like the old weight of my life was being washed away too. I set out a bowl of food, but he didn't even turn his head. Fear and suspicion still came first. I didn't push him. I knew a wounded heart doesn't open easily. So I just set the bowl down and watched from a distance. No forcing, no rushing. Waiting was all I could do. And I believed. Someday he'd accept me. I'd lived in an empty house with an empty heart for so long. Waiting was second nature to me. So I sat quietly, waiting for him to come closer on his own. Even when his eyes still held that deep wariness, I never lost hope, because I believed, sooner or later, sincerity always gets through. Nothing happened all day. The food sat untouched while he stayed curled in the corner. But then, at dawn the next day, he inched closer to the bowl. One small bite, then another. From across the room, tears welled in my eyes. Because this wasn't just a meal. This was his first step toward me. His first promise that he might accept the hand I'd reached out. Such a small gesture, but to me, it was the biggest change in the world. And in that moment, I knew this little one would become family. From then on, we were always together. In the mornings, we'd walk the alleys side by side. By dusk, his tiny footsteps always echoed close behind me. He'd race ahead, then glance back to make sure I was following. With him, the same ordinary days suddenly had meaning. It had been so long since I'd smiled. But with him, the smiles just came naturally. The empty space of my life filled up with his lively pause and his boundless energy. It was like colors I'd lost long ago were finally returning, and in his pure gaze I found joy I thought was gone forever. He wasn't just a pet. He was the light I'd been missing, and my dearest friend. One ordinary day, it struck me, a crushing pain in my chest. I couldn't breathe. My body wouldn't obey me. I crumpled to the floor, helpless. Through the haze, the last thing I saw was him, frantically barking, pawing at my face, eyes desperate and pleading. His look said it all. "Grandpa, please, don't close your eyes." But my strength was fading fast. Fear gripped me. Is this how my life ends? And as my consciousness slipped away, all I could hear was his cries. All I could see were the precious, brief moments we'd shared. There was only one thing his tiny body could do: cry out for help. He scratched wildly at doors, barked nonstop at every house. His desperate cries finally reached the neighbors. If not for him, no one would have known I was lying there. They rushed over, broke in, and soon the red lights of an ambulance filled the house. I was alive because of him. Even in fear, he found the courage to save me. My little dog had become my hero. Thanks to him, I was given the gift of life once again. When I finally woke up in the hospital, I started hearing whispers. They say a dog's been sitting outside the hospital every night, waiting for someone. Patients and staff called him different things. The poor stray who lost his owner, or the dog who just keeps waiting. I only thought, what a loyal animal. It never even crossed my mind that it was him. Back then, I didn't know that the very one who saved me was also waiting outside, braving those long, lonely nights, my last hero and my truest companion. After over a month in the hospital, the day of my discharge finally came. The doors opened, and like lightning, he came racing toward me. His eyes shone with joy and relief, and I dropped to my knees, pulling him into my arms. The warmth, the love in his embrace, it filled me with a feeling too big for words. This tiny creature, the one who seemed so weak and fragile, he had saved my life. This little one was my hero. And in his warmth, I found the strength to keep going. He's not just an animal anymore. He's my family, my partner, the one who saved my life, my most precious hero. Before him, my world was full of emptiness and despair. Now every morning starts with the sound of his little paws, and every single day with him feels like a gift. Even at this late stage of life, I'm not alone. We may have met by chance, but we became exactly what the other needed. The wag of his tail, the sparkle in his eyes, those are what will carry me through, all the way to the end.